morning, world. Welcome to the Rise Up with Dragon podcast with your host, Dragon.
Great morning, world. It's your boy Dragon coming to you live from the Chicken and Dragon bedroom today. Just coming to you raw and got a lot of crazy things going on in life, which I actually have learned to embrace because it gives me the opportunity to try out some of all this stuff. But just to catch everybody up, for everybody that knows our story, Chicken and I are in the process and throes for quite some time now due to the pandemic. It's been delayed, but we're in the process of adopting our beautiful young ducky from South Africa, and we've been having a lot of struggle doing that. And she almost made it here, and then she was turned away again at the border. And so Chicken is now in South Africa, and Dragon is soon to follow. So once again, I say great morning to you, and I just come to you from a place of gratitude today, and I hope that people can appreciate the raw kind of live nature of the way this podcast rocks. And the reason why I say that is because I don't like to just teach people things and share things. These are things that I actually use, and they help me quite a bit. So great morning, world. Welcome to the Rise Up with Dragon podcast / show. We are streaming live. It's at a different time today for the live audience, 8 a.m. rather than 9, as things would have it. And we're still streaming live on YouTube and the Facebook community and stuff. So I see some of you popping in. So love to hear some comments from you, and maybe even just chime in with great morning. And we're gonna rock a good one today. So for those of you that have been following along, especially with the live show, there's some Anna Lee. Good to see you, my sweetie. What an amazing rock star this woman is, what she's accomplished. So for those of you that have been following along with the live show, because I haven't posted this one yet on the podcast. By the way, our little podcast that started off as me just practicing my craft and speaking and stuff and getting some feedback from you. I never knew that my podcast was going to become a thing, but it's become a thing. And our podcast is getting close to 50,000 downloads a month right now, which is just crazy, and just very exciting to see that happening and watching it evolve organically. So anyway, the other day, I did a Rise Up called Anti-Joy. And anti-joy was another way of saying anger, right? So that lesson that I learned was what triggered today's. Today is called Under Pressure, and it's dealing with stress. I don't know if any of you ever experienced stress, but stress is something that I think a lot of people are very familiar with. But in the process, because when I'm doing Rise Ups and I'm doing them organically, just like right now, I have my Rise Up here. For those of you watching on the video, I have my Rise Up here. And, I do read from it, but I also put myself in it as well, and I kind of absorb it as I go, which gives me the ability to think while I'm doing the Rise Up about something else. So while I was doing that Rise Up called Anti-Joy, I had this idea of like what triggers the feelings of anger and anti-joy and things like that. So I started to just everywhere I look, because I'm working on this interface response system in my book, where I'm going to teach people how to better equip themselves to respond to adversities and happenings in life. Because as a reminder, one of the Stoic principles that I love to embrace and share with you guys is the skill set of delineating the difference between things that are in our control and out of our control, right? So it's not the happenings, it's how we respond to them. So one of the primary things that we have to learn how to respond to is stress. And what is it in this whole relationship, and how that was probably one of the things that triggers anti-joy or anger. So that's where I got the idea. And I share that with you because it's kind of like reading a book. When I read a book and I'm learning and I'm absorbing that, because I read about a book a week, and I'll show you the book I'm reading now. Very often I'll learn something and I'll see that the author said, I learned this from this person, which is the next book that I read. So I go on a book, like it's like a book scavenger hunt. One thing leads to the other. The same thing happens when I'm doing a Rise Up. And, remember, part of my 15 days of discipline and part of this whole thing that I'm teaching you about, this morning routine, win the morning, win the day, is to just become conscious and aware of it. It's not easy to run a podcast and do it live and all those things if you're connected to the outcome of it and what people will think. But if you're doing it as an exercise and just allowing yourself to be and go through the motions of just taking this information that you've received and sharing it and seeing what happens, detached from the outcome, it gives you this place where you can also be mindful and think of things, which leads you to the next. Because I get a lot of people, I've done thousands of Rise Ups, and a lot of people ask me, where do you come up with all these ideas? So as I'm speaking to you right now and practicing and going through, I'm going to give you Under Pressure here, I'll think of something else. And during this Rise Up or right after it, I'll make some notes. Sometimes I open up in Clubhouse for an after party and people ask questions and make distinctions, or I have a conversation with one of you during the day, and that'll be where the Rise Up comes from. So great morning, world. Just excited to be here. So what I want to do right now, this is called Under Pressure, Dealing with Stress. And I'm gonna go through this right now. And what my hope is that you not only learn how to deal with stress, but also have a better understanding of what stress is. So, dealing with stress. So a sizable part and value in developing a more effective interface response system is your relationship and your response to stress, right? So let's unpack that and get a better understanding on what stress is and learn how to control our response to it for a more favorable outcome that makes better use of the unpredictable impermanence of life. Oh, wait a second, something's coming up here. Okay, good. So think about this for a second. Right now, in this very moment, you're running what I've called before your regularly scheduled program, right? But you're also running your regularly scheduled stress response system. So what I mean by that is when things happen and you're reacting to them, when stressful events happen, you have a programmed stress response system. And what I mean is you have this knee-jerk reaction as to how you react to things. So you're running your traditional programmed stress response system right now. So chances are, if you're like me, chances are it's not working very well for you, right? If it was, you probably wouldn't be listening to this podcast. You probably wouldn't be seeking. As a matter of fact, even if it is working good for you and you're somebody that works a lot on personal growth, chances are you can do better, just like me. I feel that, I practice Buddhism, I practice Stoicism. I have a pretty good interface response system and I have a pretty good stress response system, but I know it can be so much better, right? Because at the end of the day, it's almost impossible to not have a negative feeling associated with something that's icky, right? So chances are it's not serving you well and it's not your fault, right? So let's go back into that. You hear me talk about this all the time. So you've been programmed, as a reminder, your stress response system and your interface response system is very, very largely affected by your program. And I speak about this all the time because a lot of people get this, but I want you to really get it, right? So you're programmed by your mother, father, teacher, preacher, and society, but it's even bigger than that. I'm going to go deeper here. So what I mean is your mother, father, teacher, preacher, and society, all the things that you've been consuming since you were born, it's even bigger than that. Because if you think about where your programmers got their information from, it goes back and it goes back and it goes back until we go back to like caveman time. So this stuff has been going on for like thousands of years. They got their programming. We can't just blame if you guys want to blame somebody for all of the crap going on in your life and who made you do it, you should probably go back and like blame Neanderthal men. You know what I mean? Great morning, Hillary and Annalie. So they got their programming from their parents and so on and so on and so on. So it goes all the way back, right? And this has to do with natural selection, and human beings just always learning things to survive. So if you respond to a stressful event with reacting feelings of anger or anti-joy, like I said before, or frustration, or even freezing up, it's not a defect of your own. I really want to help people grasp this. If you have a bad response and you fly off the handle, I want you to give yourself a little bit of grace, because in this space of giving yourself grace, you'll be able to fix some things. It's not a defect of your own, right? You don't have a bad response system. You've just got a learned response system that's ineffective. But it's actually not your problem, but it's the way humans have been wired for survival, right? So if we weren't wired, if you didn't have, so think of the next time you have a negative response to something, I want to tell you that if you weren't wired that way, we wouldn't be here as human beings, right? If we weren't wired to react with fight, flight, or freeze, right, those responses, we wouldn't have made it this far, and we wouldn't have learned to attack or fight back, retreat, or play dead when threatened by, like a saber-toothed tiger or something like that. So it's kind of a cool thing to do, because we have a tendency of getting down on ourselves when we respond negatively to stress. So the next time you have a negative response to stress that feels like crap, I'm not saying blame it, but it makes sense. It makes sense why you're like that. And in that space is where we can fix it. So that program, right, is running, and it's a habit that's hard to break and reprogram, because it's being practiced not just by you, but generations before you for thousands of years, right? Human beings have been acting a certain way and reacting a certain way longer than you've been here. So the idea of waking up today and saying, I'm going to change today, that's a pretty big deal, right? So give yourself some grace, and also be patient with yourself as you go through this idea. So the challenge is that we respond in this day to things like paying bills or mean people or TV propaganda in the same way that we would in the past from seeing a T-Rex come after us. So what I'm saying is that we're programmed over all these years to react survivalistically so that we don't die. You know what I mean? But we're reacting the same way to things that really don't matter. So that opens up this new component of the interface response system. So I told you right now I'm reading this amazing book. I'm trying to get her, Melanie Greenberg, PhD, I'm trying to get her on the show, but it's called The Stress-Proof Brain. So naturally I've got all this amazing stuff. Just to give you an idea, she has this really cool and simple tool. And if you get the book, you can learn about it. But she has this idea that's very, very in tune with the interface response system that I'm working on, where when you have a stressful event, she teaches you some questions to ask about the event. Therefore, it will help you realize that it's not really what you thought and things like that. The reason why we have to work on our stress response system is it's not defected in the sense that if a train is coming and you're too close to it and you freak out and you back up, that's a good thing. But if you get a bill or somebody says something mean to you and you have the same negative response, that's what we have to work on. And why do we want to work on this? Because it's in our control to work on it. It's not in our control to change what people say and the happenings that happen. It's in our control how do we perceive it and how we receive it and respond to it. And what's the value of that? Well, you'll have a better time. You'll enjoy life more. You'll explore more. You'll experience life more. And you won't waste all this impermanent time. That's what I was trying to say before. So this is not helping us today, as it's causing us to take a step forward and 2 steps back. Right? So the key here in beginning to reprogram our SRS, our stress response system, is to first, this is where it starts. Everybody always wants to do the do, but I want you to back up and peel it back a little bit. It's to first acknowledge that it's part of our program, right? Accept it and say something like, yeah, it makes sense while I'm feeling that way. Because the goal, by the way, you'll see at the end when I give you a couple of action steps, it's not to learn how to not react with a negative feeling. It's just a different way of interpreting what happened and what that negative feeling is. So the first step is to first acknowledge that it's part of our program, and the understanding that the feelings that you feel in response to a stressful event may not, capital letters, may not be real, and they might just be how you feel. So I'm going to repeat that. In fact, if you're listening to this, stop, write this down. If you're watching the video, write this down. The feelings that you feel may not be real. They might just be how you feel, right? So here's why this is important. Sometimes people will say to me, and they'll unconsciously say, I just feel like XYZ. So one of the things that I do in coaching is I'll say, is that really happening, or is that just how you feel? And it's an interesting question for somebody to have that moment where they recognize that it's not really what they thought. They're just explaining how they feel from what they thought. So here we are again, perception triggers, your reality sometimes. So if you change the way you look at things, things you look at change. So love that. May not be real and just might be how you feel. So it begins with a practice of the pause. The pause is so important, right? I just love the pause. So the power of the pause here, now think about what a pause is. My mentor, Dr. Wayne Scott Anderson, he teaches this concept called stop, challenge, choose, right? It's the power of the pause, right? So the power of pause here is about taking enough time to grab a different look at the stressful event using with what I call in my book, holographic vision. See, if I take a pause, rather than just react, I'll feel what I'm feeling. But if I take a pause, it'll create enough space for me to actually take a different look at it. That's when a saber-toothed tiger jumps out at you, you're not going to stop and take a look at it. You're just going to react and run. That's why we have this stress response system built into us. It's a survival tactic attached to natural selection, right? Only the strong survive. So who survives the best? The person that can recognize the tiger the earliest and run the fastest, right? But if it's a bill or somebody said something mean to you, that's what we have to change. So the first step is to pause, right? In this day and age, you have the ability to pause a little bit and just take a little bit of a look holographically, take a walk around it, and allow the more rational parts of your brain and this interface response system that I'm helping you learn. By the way, for all the people that are signing up to take my 15 days of discipline, this podcast is going to, if you're in it and you get the free component of it and you learn the overview, you'll see that this podcast is a way of practicing that stuff, right? So that idea of taking a walk around and looking at something and creating some space and some time to allow the more rational parts of your brain to show up and call the shots, right? The more rational parts of your brain. That's what a pause does, is it allows that. So the challenge that we face is our current automatic stress response system, which kind of does what it's supposed to do, as I've been saying, or at least what it's been programmed to do. So here's some cool things. So there's 4 things I'm going to share with you, 4 parts of the brain. And whether you're into this or not, I think it would be highly valuable for you to write these things down. And I want to credit, Melanie Greenberg. I got this from her. I knew this stuff, but she just did a great job of explaining this. So the science of the stress response system goes like this. By the way, disclaimer, I'm not an expert on stress. I know that a lot of you think that you are, and I think that's awesome, and I'm open to learning. What I'm doing, I'm a seeker. I'm a seeker of a better response system, and whenever I learn something that works, I test it, and if it helps other people, it goes into my work, and I share it with other people. It's a pay it forward thing that's going on right here. So the science of the stress response system goes like this. It starts with this thing in your brain called the amygdala. AMYGDLA, all right? DALA, sorry. So your brain's alarm system, that's what the amygdala is. It's an alarm system. So it senses the threat. So thank God for the amygdala, right? Especially when the tiger's there, it senses the threat and it triggers the response, right? So that's what the amygdala does. It's like the receptor, it's the sensor that senses the stress. It's kind of like an eyeball, right? So then you have something called the hypothalamus. Now your hypothalamus is your brain's operations manager, right? It's kind of like the operator, that takes a call and moves it to another call. So your hypothalamus is your brain's operations manager. It coordinates the release of stress hormones to prepare for what you guys know as fight or flight. That's what the hypothalamus does. So it starts with the amygdala, and then it goes to the hypothalamus, and the hypothalamus is where it is the place that decides fight or flight, right? How are we going to respond to this? And by the way, this is happening in lickety-split. So the hippocampus, that's the third name, the hippocampus, like college campus, this is big right here. I want you to become consciously aware of the hippocampus. The hippocampus is your brain's memory vault. This is where we struggle, right? Remember your programming, your mother, father, teacher, preacher, everything that you've learned and experienced and consumed, it's stored in your hippocampus. So your hippocampus is your brain's memory vault. It retrieves memories of past events that correlate to the current happening. Think about that. So here you are, amygdala, hypothalamus, right? But then it refers to the hippocampus and it uses your past. Remember how we always talk about trying to view the future through the lens of the past is a waste of time? So it goes to the hippocampus and it says, is this a good or a bad thing based on your past memories, right? So the hippocampus retrieves memories of past events and correlates to the current happening. There's the problem, is if you've been trained to believe something, that's how you'll perceive something. So this damn hippocampus is where we need to do the rewiring, right? And we'll talk about that. So it's the hippocampus's job is to use its past experiences to help you advance and not make the same mistake twice. So you see that. So that damn hippocampus. Now the last part is the prefrontal cortex. Now the prefrontal cortex is known as the CEO of your brain. It puts all the information from your amygdala and hippocampus to create a proper response. It's like, boom, this happens. These 4 areas light up, hippocampus screws it all up, and then the prefrontal cortex goes, and it's like it takes the gavel into court and it makes the decision. So and it creates a proper response to the perceived stress or happening. Then it keeps communicating with the amygdala as things progress or taper off, right? It's because the amygdala has memories of how long things last. And so if you ever get like worried and you totally buy into the perceptions and everything's attached to it, you're just running a program based on a past experience, Think about it. If a new stressor happens that you've never experienced before, for some reason it stresses you out, you'll go to the hippocampus, and the hippocampus say, I don't know what the fuck this is, right? I've never experienced this before. So therefore you won't pose judgment on it, and you probably have a better chance of recognizing that it's not a big deal, right? If I ever teach somebody in my coaching to let go of the past, right, and live in the present moment, what I'm doing is, because we talk a lot about this idea of your brain, your analytical brain, which is really the hippocampus, calling the shots in your body, and your analytical brain was programmed by your past. I'm basically saying, let's bypass. This is what my chicken's meditations do, Karma Mind. When you meditate, technically you're bypassing your analytical mind, this hippocampus thing, and you're clearing yourself, and it's giving you the ability to make more rational decisions. That's what I think meditation is. Pretty cool stuff. So anyway, that's those 4 components. That's what's going on, and it's happening so fast. How are you supposed to stop and say, wait a second, before the amygdala and the hypothalamus go and refer to the hippocampus, I'm going to take a stop. So you have to learn and practice how to just pause that stuff from happening. So that's what we're going to learn to do right now. So there's much valuable information found in this system as we look at creating a more supportive response to the things that we interface with, a more efficient and effective interface response system. So the good news is that we now know that we can rewire our brains and our stress response system with a new one. So what we're going to learn how to do is we're going to learn how to reprogram our stress response system, our brains. In fact, we do this ironically using the same methods and accessing the same science that we use to create the ones that we wish to change. Here's a really, really cool concept. If you have a bad habit right now, and part of your bad habit might be the way you respond to things, but if you have a bad habit right now, that means that you have practiced something long enough that you are now unconsciously reacting with that bad habit. That's why people struggle with weight issues and a lot of mental issues and stuff like that, and also finances. A lot of reasons people don't make it to the promised land with money is because they have these bad they have these bad habits. That's what I loved about Nir Eyal's book, Indistractable, is imagine if you learn how to become less distractible, right? The other day, somebody told me, I'm just getting distracted all the time. There's a lot going on. And I said, are you being distracted or are you distractible right now? That's what you have to work on, because there's always distractions. It's just a matter of how you respond to them. So the great neuroscience scientist Donald Hebb, H-E-B-B, was known for his famous quote, "Neurons that fire together, wire together." So he's referring to our brains and this concept of neuroplasticity, right? The neuroplastic capacity that we have to rewire. And what that means is we actually know through science that we can create new pathways that are going to affect this stress response system. We can actually create a new way of reacting to things over time. Actually, a new wiring. It's like taking new wires and bypassing the old circuit until that old circuit dies and we have this new wire that's more efficient. That's the idea of the interface response system, is to create not just a new thing to practice, something that actually becomes your new normal. So neurons that fire together, wire together. So this means that by changing our thoughts, feelings, and actions and activating neural pathways that support them over time with repetition, we create a new automatic stress response system. So it starts with thoughts, feelings, and actions. I always refer to that as 3 for 3. My goal every day is to go 3 for 3, get my thoughts, feelings, and actions in alignment with where I want to go, not where I don't want to go. So it's practice. Still working on it. I'll be working on it until I slide into home. So this is a massive part of the IRS. So this gives a whole new meaning to goal setting and goal getting. If you commit to leveraging a goal by going 3 for 3, like I just said, every day, remember 3 for 3 means thoughts, feelings, and actions in alignment and support with what you want. So if you know what you want, ask yourself what kind of thoughts, feelings, and actions support it. And remember, just like the bouncer checking IDs, you also have to decide who gets in and who doesn't, right? You got to throw some weight off the plane to elevate it sometimes. So if you go 3 for 3 every day to support it, that's the idea. Thoughts, feelings, and actions. You not only will achieve the goal, right? Remember I said if you set a goal and you go 3 for 3, thoughts, feelings, and actions on a repetitive basis, not only will you achieve the goal, that's where we say hard work, do the hard work and all that stuff. But if you do this long enough, that'll be the way you do things now. You'll create a new reaction system. So remember something, once you figure out something that's working, do it long enough until you no longer know you're doing it. So you won't only achieve the goal, but you'll become what we call unconsciously competent at the thoughts, feelings, and actions. So imagine if you practiced, just for the fun of it, imagine if somebody said something mean to you. Let me think about it. I'll be transparent right now. When I'm helping somebody, I'll give you an idea. When I'm helping somebody, coaching them, mentoring them, and they say that they're not happy or something's going wrong, I have a tendency to have an icky feeling that I don't like that because I kind of feel responsible for it. So how do I feel? It's a negative feeling. It changes the way I breathe. It kind of bums me out. You know, I'll make a face expression and stuff like that. So just to give you an idea, imagine if I just started practicing, because that doesn't support where I want to go, to be upset and depressed. So imagine if now, whenever somebody makes a complaint to me, and I just say to them, huh. And what I do with that sound is I don't absorb it as my thing. I say that sound, and it makes me say, I wonder why they're really upset. So I detach from it. So if I do that long enough, that'll become my new response system. So it drives Chicken nuts because anytime she comes in and files a complaint, she always hears me go, huh, right? She goes, don't me, but that's what I'm doing. So you'll become unconsciously competent about the activities in support of the goal, all because of what Donald Herb says. Remember, he says neurons that fire together wire together. So I'm firing off new neurons long enough until they wire, until they get wired. That's how we change. So this is the science behind habit formation, as a lot of you know, and you can get started right now. Remember, you are in the past. This is heavy duty stuff right here. Remember something, because if I say, if you went back 5 years from today and started practicing this stuff and did it with repetition, can you agree with me that things would be different for you right now? You'd probably be enjoying life more if you had a better response system. So that being said, and the answer is yes, I know it is. Remember something. Right now, as you listen to this, whether you're listening to it live or you're listening to it with the majority of people on the podcast, you're living right now in the past of your future. So do you want to wait 5 more years and have me in 5 years ask you, hey, if you went back 5 years and changed the way you looked at things and your thoughts, feelings, and actions on a regular basis and built a new interface response system, would things be differently? So you're right there right now, because I just jumped light years ahead, right? I just jumped 5 years ahead and had that conversation with you. And I said, I'm going to go back 5 years and tell you this now. So you're there. I know that's pretty heavy. So you can start today and in effect, bend and alter your reality, right? So there's a version of your future 5 years from now where things haven't changed and things still suck. And then there's another version which you're in control of right in this moment, listening to this podcast. Maybe something worth sharing with somebody else that will bend that reality. You are actually in control of your future. A lot of people believe that what will be will be. It will, but it'll be also in accordance with what you do, right? So change that. So having the feelings associated with stress is totally normal, by the way. Little side note. The goal is not to eradicate stressful negative feelings. It's totally normal and fine. It's just that when we allow ourselves to escalate, this is it. When you have a stress response and it's negative, it's totally fine. It's just when you allow yourself to escalate the situation by buying into false impressions that are accompanying those feelings. Think about what that means. If I feel icky when that person complains, I'm also in turn seeing that there's an impression that they're blaming me for something. An impression. It's not real. It's an impression. If I buy into that impression and allow it to escalate, now I'm screwed. But it's okay for me to feel that way and say, makes sense because of the saber-toothed tiger, but pause, holographic vision, different response system, firing a different neuron, I'm not going to buy into the impression, right? If you like that idea of something that you think exists but it doesn't really, go listen to my podcast called The Gateless Gate. So the power of the pause is super, super important. I'm going to come back to that. We're almost done. To pause after experiencing a potentially stressful event means, here's what it means to pause. That's what I want you to practice today. Just pause. Just pause. Take a second and just go, and then if somebody says, what do you mean, just say, just want to think about it a little bit, right? People don't like when you take time. They want boom. They want a reaction right away. They want you to react the way they want you to react. But you're going to pause. You're going to take some time. So by pausing, what that's doing is that to pause after experiencing a potentially stressful event means to mindfully and compassionately distance yourself from the stressful thoughts and the impressions, thus giving you a healthy space to better respond to them. That's what the pause is. You're giving yourself a chance to respond differently. So now you see that the stress response system, the problem with it is it fires off so quick. That's why you have to practice the pause. You got to slow it down. That's the key. So one quick tip that I want to give you, and this one I grabbed on my run this morning in my head. So one quick tip and a tool to apply. So there's a Stoic principle, which I love Stoicism, a Stoic principle that you can practice when you're in the belly of the beast called stress. Like when you're in that feeling of stress, you can practice this, meaning it's a tool. Pull it out of your tool belt. So take a step back from the stress and view it with what's called a Stoic indifference, meaning don't give it any meaning. That's the key. Don't give the stressful event any meaning. Take a break before you give it a meaning. So that's called a Stoic indifference, neither here nor there, right? It neither is or isn't. So don't give it any meaning, and then or connection to you personally. So not only don't give it any meaning, don't allow it to be connected to you personally. Just perceive it from the outside in. That's what holographic vision is. And then take note of the feelings that you're feeling and label them. This is a neuron practicing thing. Label the feelings that you're feeling as harmless, right? So if I feel icky because somebody files a complaint, I'm going to say that icky feeling is harmless. I'm practicing this, right? The first time you might not buy into it. Label it as harmless. And then take that space, that moment, while you're labeling your feelings as harmless, not buying into the impressions that are associated with the stressful event, take this space to distance yourself once again from the happening enough to enable yourself with the appropriate supporting response that serves you where you are voluntarily heading. You go back to where you want to go and you say, this doesn't serve me, right? So hopefully I said something today that was of value. I'd love your feedback. Somebody says, I love your hat. This hat that says, Think Life is Different, I got from Jamil Frazier, who wrote an amazing book called 12 Shifts. I'm sure he would send you one. Love and appreciate you all. Just want you to know that today, this was not an easy one for me today because I don't have my chicken. I finally found somebody in my life that I don't want to be without, and she's away right now. Now she's away with our little girl. Timestamp right now is the 25th of June. I'm less than a week away from flying out to South Africa to go raise hell and help get our little girl here during these crazy times. But I always feel great after I do this. So thanks so much. Great morning to everybody. I wish you just an amazing experience and curiously compassionate exploration of this day. Remember, we always appreciate when you go subscribe to our podcast if you're watching this live, and that is Rise Up Dragon on all the platforms. Leave us a rating and a review. That really helps. Another thing is you can find me on Instagram and you can communicate with me. I always respond. And that is IG Rise Up a Dragon. You can sign up for our 15 Days of Discipline free overview by going to riseupadragon.com. It'll pop up right in front of you, 15 Days of Discipline, it's free. And then also follow me on Clubhouse. We got a lot of great stuff in Clubhouse, and that you can find me in Clubhouse at Makes Sense. Love and appreciate you. We'll put our little outro here, and I wish you all a great day.